What are the top 5 survival rules for men in a divorce? So, a man going through a divorce, what are your top things you need to be concerned about? What are the top 5 things? So, number 1 is file first. If a divorce is coming, and you know a divorce is coming, obviously, you want to file something first. You want to be able to frame the issues as one reason for filing first in a divorce. Whoever files first is going to be saying whatever they want to say about the other person. The court's going to see their documents first. The court is going to respond to them first. You're then responding to whatever they filed. So you want to set the stage, frame the issues, whatever phrase you want to use for it. You're setting things up, you're controlling things. You're deciding what's in the documents and what is not in the documents just by being the one to file. A divorce is a lawsuit. Either you can file or your wife can file. You're always better off to be the one to file. You want to be the plaintiff in a divorce case, always, every time, there's no question. So that's one strategy for men in divorce. Get something filed first. It's possible to get court orders signed without a hearing. That can affect things. I met with somebody last week. Their wife had filed first, got a temporary restraining order, and froze their bank account and froze like the checking account that they both use. Now neither of them can write checks out of this account until things are straightened up. It doesn't make any sense, right? It hurt the wife as well, but lawyers do this kind of stuff. It doesn't always work out. It's not a great thing. So you want to be not responding to this. So if you want to be the one deciding what the court order says, or let's say you're living apart at the beginning of a divorce and you have kids. So your wife files for divorce first because you don't live together. She can have the court set up a temporary order, what's called an ex parte order, for shared custody and for parenting time and even for child support numbers, and a requirement for you to pay the bills and whatever other things she decides she wants to do. And then you're stuck with those things. You can object to that court order and get a court hearing somewhere down the road, but it's kind of too late at that point. The judge has already signed an order. Now you're in a place of trying to convince them of changing a court order that they had already signed and had already decided. So number 1, top 5 survival rules, make sure you file first. If you can, always, every time, always a plan, always a good idea. Number 2 in the survival rules in divorce is this concept that temporary orders become permanent. And this ties into the first concept. If you can be the first to file, you can be the one to set up some temporary court orders that are going to be in place, and those lead They frame the issues. They lead how your divorce case is going to go, how things are going to proceed, and then those temporary court orders can become permanent. So if there's a temporary order that says that you have to pay whatever share of the bills, you'll probably end up stuck with that during the entire divorce case. In Michigan, where I do divorce practice, Metro Detroit in Michigan, if you have kids, a divorce case can be it's a 6-month waiting period. So it can be a 5 to 9-month process where you're stuck with a court order that maybe isn't really the right court order, but the temporary order that got entered became permanent. So you don't want to agree to something temporarily if there's any way to avoid it. Don't agree to something that you're not going to be able to do long term, because these temporary orders have a definite way of becoming permanent. If you agree to a temporary parenting time schedule, just trying to reach an agreement, you don't want to keep fighting about things, and you agree to something where your wife has custody and all you have is every other weekend, and now you want more time with your kids, it's going to be a lot harder to do that later. You're better off not agreeing. You say, if you're only willing to let me have every other weekend, then I'm not going to agree to anything. Let's have a judge make a temporary decision. That's a good strategy. These temporary orders definitely become permanent, so you want to prepare for them. They are important. They are something you should worry about. It's not something you want to say, well, it won't matter, I can always change this later. A lot of times you can't. There's not really a reason to change a temporary order later unless there's new facts or there's something comes out that there was some compelling reason to redo this and make it different. So you want to avoid that trap. Your rule being this idea that temporary orders become permanent, so watch out for that. And survival rule number 3 for men in divorce cases is do not move out of the house. This happens all the time. You want to be really careful on this if you have children. When you do not have children, it's way less of a concern, but it still can be a concern and can still create problems. But in general, you live together at the beginning of a divorce, things are going to go a lot better for you. You do not want to be moving out. Now, if there's domestic violence or something extreme going on, then of course you wouldn't have a choice, or for your own safety, you may need to move out. But if that kind of thing is not happening, just because it's a little uncomfortable doesn't mean that you should go rushing into moving out. If you're going to move out of the house and a divorce is pending or a divorce is coming, you can do it. You just want to do it the right way. We help people all the time with that discussion. You get a divorce case filed, get some temporary orders in place, establish some ground rules, and then you can move out. In other words, before you move out, you want to know what's going to go on with custody, what's happening with parenting time, what's expected of you for child support, what's required as far as paying the bills. what's going on with your stuff, with the house, with all these things. So you want to get some of these questions out of the way. If the other person wants you to move out and they're all hung up on getting you moved out of the house, then use that as a negotiating point. You say, okay, well, we can talk about that. I'm willing to leave. You're so anxious to have me move out. I'll do that, but we got to have some ground rules first. If you move out first and then try to have a discussion about details and what you're going to do, you have no strength to negotiate. The person already has you out. They have everything they need. They're not going to be worried about it. Now your wife's not going to be worried about your custody and parenting time arrangements. They don't care when you see the kids. They're mad at you anyways. They got you moved out. They're not going to talk to you about what bills they're going to pay and what bills you're going to pay. They'll just have you pay all the bills. You already moved out. So you lose your strength to negotiate if you've already moved out and haven't had any of these things worked out yet. So that's another one of the survival rules. Rule number 3, do not move out of the house. There's exceptions, of course, but you really got to be careful on that one. Rule number 4 is do not lie. Avoid fraud and deceit and taking advantage of these kind of things. All it's going to do is make you look bad. It's never going to work. And if you're in a court hearing and your wife is able to prove that you lied about something, even if it's something small, now you just look like someone that's deceitful. Now the judge is going to believe you're lying the next time that you're accused of not being truthful about something, because they already had proof that you lied about something else. So you want to be careful on that. You got to get advice from an attorney about what things you can admit and what things you shouldn't admit. But you never want to be in a place of being deceitful, being fraudulent, of trying to hide things, of trying to lie about things. We'll get these questions from time to time from a client, and they'll say, well, how do I hide my bank account from my wife? Or how do I keep this money from her? Or how do I avoid disclosing this asset that I own or this other thing? And the answer is you can't. That's not what divorce cases are for. We tell clients all the time, we're not here to help you deceive your wife. We don't do that. And you shouldn't be looking to do that either. It really doesn't pay. In the long term, it's not a good idea. It's just going to backfire on you. So it seems like a simple concept, do not lie, but it means all the other things, the fraud and the deceit and the misleading and the misinformation and failing to disclose. And you want to stay away from all that stuff. That's never worked for anybody. In my 25 years of doing this, I've never seen that helpful to anybody in a divorce case. And then number 5 in our rules of survival for men in divorce, rule number 5 is create a strategy. Think about what you want and think about what you want to see happen in your divorce case. If you don't know what kind of custody and parenting time schedule you want in your divorce, then how can anybody get you that schedule? If you don't know what you want to see happen with your house, how can anybody make that happen? A lot of times, with a house, for example, there's usually 3 choices in a divorce case. You can keep the house, your wife could keep it, or you could sell it. And you got to look at whether those 3 options are viable, and you got to look at which one of those you want to see happen. Or custody and parenting time, same thing. You got to think about when you want the kids to be with you, what kind of time you want the kids to spend with you, and look at their school schedule and look at your work schedule and look at how this is all going to play out once you're living separately and you've gone your separate ways and the divorce is final. What do you want to see happen? Because people can't help you reach your goals if you don't have any goals. There's that saying that if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there, right? You don't want that. You have a lawyer, you're paying for somebody's time to handle your divorce and represent you and do what you want. So think about what it is that you want, whether it's custody, parenting time, child support isn't necessarily a negotiation, but you still want to have some sense of what that looks like, what you want to see happen with the house, division of assets, what realistically can you expect? And if there's choices and your attorney's talking about some different options that you have, give those some thought and think it over and give them some feedback on what you want to see happen. They can't accomplish your goals if they don't know what your goals are. So hopefully that helps. That's our top 5 survival rules for men in divorce.